Hey everybody, this is the new EcoFlow Delta Ultra. This is the largest power station that EcoFlow has released, and today we are going to be testing this out. Now the Ultra is unique because of its massive 7200 watt inverter that puts out both 120 and 240 volts of power. That means that you can get split phase output from one head unit, unlike other brands that are currently on the market. Now I've been testing with one battery. This is a lithium iron phosphate battery rated at 6,144 watt hours of capacity. Now for a quick size comparison, this is the EcoFlow Delta 2 Max rated at 2,048 watt hours of capacity. 3 of these batteries fit into one of these batteries. Due to the size of the EcoFlow Delta Ultra, there are 2 options to move it around. The included option in the box is this dolly here. And you can see that the wheels are large and it's really easy to move the power station around. Now this dolly here supports 5 batteries in the inverter, so you can stack this up quite a bit. Now if you're looking for more of a portable setup for just the inverter and one battery, you can use this trolley. So let me go ahead and move this over to the trolley so you can see how it works. So I've gone ahead and installed the power station on the trolley. There are 2 large wheels and 2 smaller wheels, and it just balances. But if you want to move it around, you just lift it up off the small wheels, and it's much more portable with this setup. Now just keep in mind, this only supports one battery and one inverter. I like that this has a telescoping handle so you can make it much more compact, and then you can extend the handle to make it easier to move. Zooming in on the front of the power station, you have a really simple display. You have your watts input, your watts output, a state of charge indicator, and an estimated time until the battery is empty. Remember, you have the EcoFlow app to see anything else that you want. You have your power buttons here, and under these flaps you have multiple USB ports. Now there are actually 5 different ports for 120 volt output. These 2 here are for the backup UPS. These 3 here are for the online UPS. Now this is a 30 amp RV connection. Now for the 240 volt, you can get 240 volts and 30 amps from this connection here. Now I've been able to successfully pull 7,200 watts from these ports and 7,200 watts from this port. Moving over to the far left of the power station, right here there's a 4G module that you can purchase to add internet connectivity, so you can connect this anywhere that you have cell service. On the far right of the power station you have an additional flap with extra goodies. Up top you have a 30 amp DC output. Right here you have your low solar voltage input. You have your fast charging switch with the grounding lug and your AC input. Now keep in mind this is an early prototype and the production model will look a little different in here. So I've rotated the inverter and the battery so you can see how they connect up, and we can go over some of these other ports. So right here you have the connection from the inverter to a battery. Now this connection is awesome. Look how slim it is. It doesn't take up additional space. Now if you want to connect up a secondary one, you just open this port, stack up another battery, and connect it here. And they alternate their connection all the way up until you have 5 batteries per stack. Right here you have your high PV input port. I love that these just tuck away. So this is your disconnect for your solar, and you have MC4 connections to connect that up. And then right here we have a special port. It's called the Infinity port. Now this is how you connect it up to the smart home panel, and this allows for 240 volt 30 amp input or output. You can also charge this via 2 special adapters. One of the adapters here is for generator charging. This is a 240 volt generator cable. So basically this plugs in here, and then you plug this into your 240 volt output of your gas generator to charge it up to 7,200 watts. And then this here is a level 2 EV charging cable. So you plug this in here and plug your 240 volt car charging cable into this, and you can charge at 7,200 watts as well. Now, while I was explaining all that, I don't know if you caught that I talked about 2 different solar ports. There are 2 solar inputs on this power station. The low PV input accepts 30 volts all the way up to 150 volts at 15 amps for 1,600 watts of solar input. The secondary port is the high PV input. It accepts 80 volts all the way up to 450 volts at 15 amps for a total of 4,000 watts of solar. And yes, you can use both at the same time for 5,600 watts of solar input. Now I'm sure you guys are curious about the warranty and pricing for the EcoFlow Delta Ultra, so let's go ahead and break down the warranty first. Now as for the inverter by itself, it has a 5-year warranty, and each of the batteries have a 10-year warranty. Now let's go ahead and break down the pricing for the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. If you want to purchase the basic bundle, which is 1 inverter, 1 battery, The MSRP is $57.99, and you can get a $1,000 off coupon. Check that coupon down in the video description. Bring the price down to $47.99 or only 78 cents per watt hour. Now you can also pick up a basic bundle with a smart home panel 2. The MSRP for that is $71.99, and the coupon is also valid for that bundle if you want to use it, and that brings the price down to $61.99. Now you can also purchase the inverter, battery, and smart home panel separately. So the MSRP for the inverter is $27.99, the MSRP for the battery is $32.99, and the MSRP for the smart home panel 2 is $18.99. At launch, they are slightly different. For example, the inverter costs $27.99, the battery costs $27.99, and the smart home panel 2 costs $15.99. So you do get quite a discount by picking these up at launch. Now that's just a quick overview of some of the features and the ports on the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. Now if you want to learn more about those same features, please check out EcoFlow's website and also EcoFlow's YouTube channel, where they've created quite a few videos for this, including a full teardown video of the inverter, which is really, really cool to see. Now in the next part of the video, we're going to break down the actual performance of the AC inverter, and we'll be testing the DC output. We're going to answer questions like, how many watts can we actually get from this? How loud are the fans? Is there any interference or noise that the AC inverter creates? Well, let's find out. Let's go ahead and plug some stuff in and see what happens. When first testing the Ultra's AC inverter, I wanted to see how much power I could get from it continuously without it shutting down. In order to get close to the full 7200 watt output, I had to connect up a bunch of different loads, including 3 different power stations and 2 1500 watt heaters. All of the 120 volt outlets of the power station were being used up in this test. When I started the max load, I was pulling slightly over 7100 watts, which is a crazy amount of power. While under this load, my oscilloscope was showing a really clean sine wave with a voltage output of 120 volts and 60 hertz. These results show you how good the power output is from this inverter. Now, unfortunately, after the test had been going for about 4 minutes, the AC inverter shut down unexpectedly. I restarted the test at a lower wattage load to see if it would shut down again. The new load was around 6900 watts, so a little bit less power. After the test had been running for a total of 11.5 minutes, I wanted to measure the loudness of the fans. I measured only 42 decibels next to the fans, which is basically the noise level of the room that I'm sitting in. You can actually hear my kids upstairs running around in the background. Nothing I have ever tested on the channel comes close to this level of quiet. The reason this model is so quiet is that they use a cooling setup like a computer. It uses a bunch of heat pipes and heat sinks to cool down the power station. Instead of just putting a ton of air over all the components, those fans end up being louder, and this is much quieter. To see the heatsink in action, I took a couple of pictures with my thermal camera. I measured 128 degrees on the heatsink. Taking a look at the side of the power station, the only warm part was the battery connection cable at 89 degrees Fahrenheit. I really like the new cooling method on this power station, and you can tell the amount of engineering that went into the design. As I let the max load test finish up, the power station was able to pull around 6900 watts for the remainder of the test. It did not shut down again. EcoFlow let me know that the first overload error happened because my inverter is from an early prototype, and that the true production model will not suffer from these issues. It will be able to handle 7200 watts continuously and surge even higher. Now, I also wanted to test for noise on the AC inverter. EcoFlow has lessened the noise and interference on their power stations with their latest model, so let's see how this one does. Using my dirty electricity meter, the electromagnetic interference reading was 1830 millivolts. I also connected a guitar amp to the inverter output. You can see that when compared to wall power, it's very clean sounding. I also like to test with a small AC radio, so here's a demo of what that sounded like.
Most is that building would be the only one affected, so because of how they're designed.
Yeah,
so it's going to make the community a lot.
These results are similar to other models that I've tested. You'll want to make sure that your radio equipment is a couple feet away to avoid interference from the inverter. The EcoFlow Delta Ultra also supports both online and backup UPS functionality. The backup UPS mode is advertised to be a 20 millisecond cutover, and the online UPS mode is advertised to be instantaneous. I was able to capture both UPS cutover times using my oscilloscope so we can see the exact swap over times. For the backup UPS, I recorded 19.5 milliseconds, which is within the advertised spec. When measuring the online UPS mode, you can see the swap over time is much less. Since the load never really lost power, I don't really have to measure the cutover time, but if you want to take a look at the clean section of the wave to the clean section of the wave, it's about 4 milliseconds. But like I said earlier, it never lost power. These are really impressive results for the online UPS. Now, I still wanted to test the online UPS mode with my desktop workstation and LED monitor. I had them both plugged into the online UPS ports, and I was charging the power station via the wall, and I disconnected the charging cable. It swapped over to the battery backup, and each time it swapped over, the PC and monitor were still running, so the online UPS mode is definitely fast enough for sensitive electronics. The final tests that I completed on the Delta Ultra were both for the AC capacity and AC idle results. The internal battery is rated for 6,144 watt hours of capacity. When draining the power station down at a 0.2C rate, I was able to pull 5,620 watt hours of usable capacity. This result of 5,620 watt hours is 91.4% of the advertised capacity. These results are above normal. These are very impressive results for capacity on this power station. Now, how much power is used as the AC inverter is enabled and sitting idle? I started with the power station at 100% state of charge and left the inverter enabled for 12 hours with no load. When I came back, it was sitting at 93% state of charge, meaning the inverter had used 7% of the battery after 12 hours, or about 0.58% per hour. Now, this inverter is huge, and that is only a little bit of power, so I was expecting a lot more power usage in the background, but this is a very impressive number. Now, in order to give you guys a little bit of perspective, this is the Blue Yeti AC500. It has a smaller 5,000 watt inverter that puts out 120 volts. Now, when I have this connected up to the same capacity as the Ultra, it still uses 1.3% per hour with the AC inverter running. So the Ultra, even though it puts out 120 and 240 and a total of 7,200 watts, it uses half the same amount of power while it's sitting idle. Now, because the EcoFlow Delta Ultra is a home backup system, I thought it'd be beneficial to show you guys a bunch of different appliances running during a simulated power outage to see how long they last. I tested this power outage scenario by having the Ultra connected up to my 240 volt transfer switch. With all 10 circuits powered off the power station inverter, here's a breakdown of what I was keeping powered. My upstairs fridge and my kitchen microwave, my living room TV and living room lights, my gas fireplace for emergency heat. I was also powering my basement refrigerator, my home internet modem and router, my home office so I could keep working as the power was out. One of the circuits was even powering my outdoor Christmas lights and a few other boring circuits like bedroom and bathroom lights. So what were the results of the test? Well, the Ultra ran those 10 circuits for 13.5 hours. That's super impressive. Now, we usually saw around an average load of 400 to 500 watts going out from the power station inverter, but I did see spikes on the inverter if someone happened to turn on a microwave or plug in a vacuum or if a fridge compressor turned on, but keep in mind most of those high-powered appliances don't run for a long period of time. Now, I never had any charging plugged into this during this test, so you could definitely extend the runtime if you had solar plugged in or if you plugged in some sort of AC charging from an AC generator. So that would be a way to expand or extend the runtime. You could also add on additional expansion batteries to get even longer runtimes. So even with this base model with just one battery, you have a lot of potential here in this setup. Now, even though the EcoFlow Delta Ultra is designed to be a whole home backup system, I love that they still included USB ports and DC outputs so you can charge mobile devices and power your DC loads. Below the screen, you can access the USB ports. There are two 100 watt USB-C power delivery ports, and there are also two 12 watt USB-A ports. I first tested the USB-C ports by connecting two power stations that support 100 watt input. Both my River 2 Pro and my Energizer 320 were able to charge at the full supported power, pulling over 200 watts consistently. I also tested the USB-A ports at the same time, powering a small DC fan and charging my wireless microphone kit. All USB ports were able to power or charge devices simultaneously without an issue, pulling around 220 watts of power. The Ultra also has a dedicated 30 amp DC output behind this flap on the front of the power station. I connected up two of my battery load testers in parallel to pull the full 30 amps. Without a load, the DC output was regulated at 12.8 volts, and then I turned on each load and I was able to pull over 400 watts combined, or about 15 amps per load tester. The screen was estimating that this load would run for about 15 hours. Now, I'm probably the only crazy one enough to actually complete a full DC capacity test on a 6.1 kilowatt hour power station, but I actually did it, and I did it for you guys. While draining the power station with two battery load testers for combined 20 amps, it finally hit 0% after almost 19 hours. I pulled 2,467 watt hours from one tester and 2,469 watt hours from the second tester for a total usable capacity of 4,936 watt hours. When comparing that to the advertised 6,144 watt hours, that's actually 80.3% of the advertised capacity. While that's not hitting my goal of 85%, I still feel that number is fairly impressive considering the nominal voltage of the battery is near 100 volts, and this is putting out 12 volts. If you're grateful that I actually did a DC capacity test, make sure you click that thumbs up button. For my final DC test, I want to test the efficiency of the DC output. I left the DC output enabled and sitting idle for 12 hours, and when I came back, it was at 98% state of charge. This means the DC output only uses 0.16% per hour while sitting enabled with no load. Now, if you are planning to use the EcoFlow Delta Ultra in an off-grid setup, one of the most efficient ways to keep your food refrigerated is by using a 12-volt fridge. With the DC output here, we can power this basically non-stop because it's so efficient. This pulls on average around 20 to 30 watts of power depending on ambient temperature, and if you compare that to a full-size refrigerator that pulls around 100 to 175 watts, you can get a much longer runtime by using a 12-volt fridge. Now, whenever you're running a DC fridge like this, or even an AC fridge, you want to make sure that the output does not turn off automatically. Luckily, within the EcoFlow Smart app, they have auto timeout settings on all the outputs. Now, I've set each of those to never. So the DC output, the AC inverter are going to run all the way down until this hits 0%, and they will not turn off automatically. I want to quickly break down some of the basics of charging on the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. During most of my testing, I had 2 solar arrays connected to the power station because who wants to pay for extra grid power to charge these up? The first array that was connected was a 1000 watt array built with Renogy 200 watt panels in series. That array was connected to the low PV port. The second array, which I had connected to the high PV port, includes these 4 410 watt solar panels on top of my carport. Both these arrays plugged into the solar inputs, I saw on average 1800 to 1900 watts of input. Now keep in mind these numbers are in the middle of winter, so they aren't too amazing, but note that the power station is completely quiet when charging. I absolutely love that. Now, I also did not notice any issues having the solar inputs connected 24/7, which is a good relief because no one wants to disconnect and reconnect MC4 connections every morning and night. The second way to charge the power station would be by connecting the included AC charging cable. This charging option allows for up to 1800 watts input. The Delta Ultra does support pass-through charging, even while putting out both 120 volts and 240 volts of power. I was able to get around 1750 watts input while powering my 240 volt transfer switch and a small heater at the same time. The AC charging is also fully adjustable via the EcoFlow Smart app. You can set the charging speed at 100 watt increments anywhere from 500 watts all the way up to 1800 watts. You also have the ability to adjust the infinity port charging speed between 500 watts and 7200 watts. Remember that the infinity port is designed for charging at 240 volt with a gas generator or the EV level 2 charger. Now, I also tested dual charging with both solar and AC input at the same time. The power station combined both inputs for a total of 2500 watts, which wasn't bad for the end of the day solar, plus 1800 watts of AC input. In the next section of the video, I want to talk about different options for home integration with the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. How do we use this as a home backup system? And I want to start with the most affordable and the easiest way to do that. First thing you want to do is turn on the AC inverter, and then the next thing you want to do is run a bunch of different extension cables to different appliances in your home, like your full-size refrigerators, TVs, home internet setups, desktop computers, lamps, anything that you can plug into an outlet, you can run via an extension cable to this, and it allows you to power it during a power outage. Now, the main thing that you want to make sure is that when you're running extension cables, check to see if they get warm. If they get warm, then that means you're pulling too much power for the extension cable, and you have a chance to cause a fire. So always make sure you're using high quality extension cables like a 12 gauge or a 14 gauge extension cable, so that you can handle the total wattage for the load that you're running. If you do that, sure, there'll be cables all over the house, but for the most part, it's the most affordable and easiest way to integrate this as a home backup solution. Now, the second option for home integration with the EcoFlow Delta Ultra is actually using a transfer switch. So this is a transfer switch from Reliance Controls. This is their 240 volt 50 amp option. I installed this about 2 months ago. It's been working really well. This one actually has 10 different circuits. So I chose 10 critical circuits from my main power panel to integrate with this. Now, a transfer switch is really cool because it allows you to change between 2 different power sources. The bottom source, if you have the switches down, that means they are going to run off line power or your power company. If you flip your switches up to the top, they're going to run off whatever you have connected right here. So most people will integrate this with a gas generator, but these work really well with a power station like this. Now, I mentioned before that this is a 240 volt input, so I have the 240 volt output from the EcoFlow Delta Ultra plugged into the input. Now, 5 of these circuits are powered off one leg of 120, and 5 of the other circuits are powered off the second leg. Now what's nice is they actually alternate, so you can tie them together and run 240 volt appliances or circuits off this transfer switch. Now you have to keep in mind that you don't want to have those loads go over the maximum output of your power station. So this is limited to 30 amps. So a lot of the 240 volt appliances in my home, like my stoves and my air conditioner, are 40 or 50 amps. So I could not run those off this transfer switch. So I've opted to run 10 different 120 circuits, like both my full-size refrigerators. I have both microwaves on here. I have my garage door opener. I have some lights on both of the levels, some various outlets. I have my home router and Wi-Fi, my home office, so I can work from home with the power's out. So you can choose any 10 circuits to run off this. The benefit to a transfer switch is that you only have one power cable. You don't have any extension cables running throughout your house. The other benefit is that these are fairly affordable, anywhere from $200 to $500. This is one of their higher end models, so this cost me around $500, but they are fairly easy to install. It took me 2 hours to install this on a weekend, and you just have to follow the install instructions, so it's fairly easy. So I definitely like using a transfer switch for the reasons that I just mentioned, but there are some other options. Now the third option for home integration would be using an interlock on your main power panel. Now I don't have an example to show you guys, but I just want to talk about the concept really quick. So an interlock is a double pole breaker that allows you to plug in a secondary power source that attaches to your main breaker with a plate. And so the only way to turn on that secondary input source is by turning off your main breaker so you don't backfeed to the grid. So whenever you turn off your main breaker, there's a plate that allows you to turn on the secondary input, and then you can backfeed within your main power panel to feed all your circuits. Now you do need quite a large gas generator or power station to do this, but the EcoFlow Delta Ultra would work really well for that. So just wanted to show that that's definitely an option. The only downside to an interlock is that you have to completely turn everything off before you can feed your secondary power source from a gas generator. So that's really the only downside. With a transfer switch, you have the ability to switch between two power sources fairly quickly. And with an interlock, you kind of have to turn it all off. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys know that an interlock is available and another option. The final option for home integration with the EcoFlow Delta Ultra is using the new Smart Home Panel 2. Now this is kind of like an automatic transfer switch, and it turns the EcoFlow Delta Ultra into like a power wall. Now you have the ability to actually plug in 3 Delta Ultras at the bottom. You can parallel them together for a ton of 240 volt output. So if you're looking for just a giant setup, you can have a smart home panel with multiple inverters, and you can power a ton of different things. Now the build quality on this is really, really nice. I'm gonna break that down here in a second. You can pick up the Smart Home Panel 2 for about $1,400 if you bundle it with 1 inverter and 1 battery. Now EcoFlow does advise that you get this installed with a licensed electrician. You're probably gonna have to pull permits for it. But looking at the build quality, the front of this is glass. It kind of reminds me of a really nice Apple product. And then right here you have this plate where you can integrate with your circuits. I'm just going to remove this so you guys can see what it looks like on the inside. So down here at the bottom you have your main conductors where your 3 ultras would connect in. You have your neutral, 2 hots, and a ground. So really nice build quality with the Smart Home Panel 2. If you're looking for the ultimate home integration, you definitely want to go with this option. Now remember, EcoFlow has a bunch of different videos that they've made about this, so if you want to learn more about this, check out EcoFlow's channel and their videos on the Smart Home Panel 2. Now that I've finished all the performance testing on this model, I did put it through my power station grading system. Let's go ahead and bring up the report card to see how this one did. So up on the screen, you're going to see a blank scoring card for the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. Now this is breaking down the 20 requirements that the power station has to meet in order to get a perfect score. So this is based on performance and features. Things like how loud are the fans? How much of the rated capacity do you actually get? How long's the warranty? Does it have smart app connectivity? Well, let's go ahead and see how the Ultra did. So here's the final scorecard for the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. It got an A score, 9.5 out of 10 points available. It only got docked on one thing. It did not meet 85% of the DC capacity, so we took a half point off there. Now, if you want to see how this compares against any other power station that I've tested, check out the link down in the video description to my power station grading system, and you can see all the performance details for this power station and all the other ones that I've tested. Well, that's basically everything that I wanted to cover in my first video of the EcoFlow Delta Ultra. Now, I will do a couple follow-up videos on this. I do plan to pick up another battery because I want a full 12 kilowatt hours so I can get even a longer runtime. So I will be doing a video update on that as well. Very, very impressive results, guys. Remember, I have a $1,000 coupon down in the video description. So if you are interested in picking this up, you can save $1,000. And it brings that price down to 78 cents per watt hour, which is really good for such a high quality device. Now, the thing that I absolutely love about this is the new fan setup. Instead of having just mass airflow against all the internal components and just cooling them down that way, they've gone with this integrated heat sink and heat pipe system where you just never hear this thing. You don't hear it while it's charging, you don't hear it while it's discharging. The fans that they do have on the bottom that make the air go up through the heat sink, they are extremely low RPM and you never hear them. I mean, I guess you could hear them if you have your head right up next to this, but compared to any other power station that I've used, you will not hear this thing. You're gonna hear other things going on in the room instead of the power station. And I wish it was that way with other brands. Some brands that you test, you can't even be in the same room because the fans are so loud. But if you guys have any questions about this power station, please throw a comment down below. I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this. This thing is an absolute beast, and I really appreciate EcoFlow letting me check it out. And like I said, I will be doing future videos on it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please smash the thumbs up button if you like the content. And I'll recommend a few other videos that you guys can check out if you are interested in this type of thing. Thanks for watching. Hopefully we'll see you guys in the next video.